George had turned 90 today. He'd arranged a small gathering at his apartment, nothing fancy, just cake and coffee. He'd sent invitations to his 3 children, hoping at least one would come. By 6 p.m., no one had arrived. George sat at his kitchen table, looking at the untouched cake. His children were busy with their own lives. His wife had passed away 15 years ago. His friends from work were all gone now. His grandchildren barely knew him. He was 90 years old, and he was completely alone. George cut himself a small slice of cake and sat by the window, watching the street below. People walked past, living their lives, not knowing that an old man upstairs was spending his 90th birthday in silence. At 6:47 p.m., the doorbell rang. George looked up confused. He wasn't expecting anyone. He opened the door slowly. A young woman stood there, maybe 40 years old, holding flowers. "Mr. George?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," George replied, bewildered. "I'm Emma," she said. 42 years ago, I was a struggling teenager. I was suicidal. I was sitting on a bridge, ready to jump. You were walking by. You stopped. You talked to me for 3 hours. You convinced me that my life mattered. You saved my life, Mr. George." George's eyes filled with tears. He barely remembered this moment from decades ago. Emma hugged him, then left. George stood in his doorway, stunned. The doorbell rang again. A man in his 60s entered. "Mr. George, I'm David. You tutored me in math when I was failing in high school. I dropped out of school. Couldn't afford a tutor. You taught me for free, 3 times a week for a year. I passed my exams. I went to college. I became an engineer because of you." The doorbell rang again, and again, and again. For the next 2 hours, the doorbell rang 47 times. 47 people arrived at George's door. A woman he'd helped apply for a job 30 years ago. A child whose mother he'd supported through cancer. A teenager he'd mentored through grief. A young man he'd given money to when he was homeless. A girl whose life he'd changed by believing in her when no one else did. Some came with flowers. Some came with photographs. Some came with tears. All came with gratitude. They filled his apartment. They sang happy birthday. They shared stories about how George had touched their lives in ways he'd completely forgotten. Small moments of kindness that had become turning points in their journeys. A woman named Maria spoke. "Mr. George, you gave me $50 when I was desperate and ashamed to ask for help. That $50 bought food for my children that week. I got back on my feet. Now I'm a social worker helping homeless families. I do this work because someone you showed me that people care." An old man named Robert shared. "When I was grieving my wife, you sat with me every week for a year. You never said much, you just sat. That presence saved my life. I'm still here because you were there." George couldn't speak. He looked around his apartment at 47 faces, 47 lives he'd touched without realizing it. 47 people who'd remembered. 47 people who'd come. "How did you all?" George finally asked. "Social media," Emma said, smiling. "I posted about you on Facebook. I asked if anyone else had been helped by George Mitchell. Within a week, 47 people responded. We all wanted to come. We all wanted you to know that you mattered." That night, George's apartment was full of laughter, stories, and love. His children never came. But 47 strangers, people whose lives he'd saved or changed without ever expecting anything in return, came to celebrate him. George finally understood something profound. A life lived in service to others is never lonely. Every act of kindness creates a thread that connects us to others. And sometimes, those threads come back around, weaving a tapestry of love and gratitude. He was never alone. He'd never been alone.